A warm welcome, everyone. Great to see all of you here. Fantastic that we are here together today. My name is Magnus Mähring, and I'm walking around because I'm trying to find a spot where where the sound is not echoing in my head. The House of Innovation at Stockholm School of Economics is delighted to be hosting this event. This is one of the flagship events in the National Digital Day, Digitalization, which has been running for about 5 or 6 years. And we have been part of this from the beginning. And we're proud to be partners of Digitalization and to do this together with our partners, National Forum for Omställning, Swedish Center for Digital Innovation, the Wallenberg Foundations, and also our friends at the Mistra Center for Sustainable Markets here at Stockholm School of Economics, which is our core sustainability research center, and where one of our professors at House of Innovation, Mattia Bianchi, is leading one of the platforms on sustainability through innovation and entrepreneurship. So I will just say a few words. In a little while, the main hosts, Valentina Tartari, Jacob and Marcus Wallenberg Chair of Innovative and Sustainable Business Development, and Mattia Bianchi, Mats Karlgren Chair in Business Administration, will take over. But before that, I will say a few words about the theme and also introduce our keynote, Professor Frank Geels. But before that, so this is recursiveness, right? So if you need to brush up on your programming skill, we're in a recursive loop right now, and I'm going to take us back to the main story in 30 seconds. But before I do that, I am obliged to let you know that you might have an information deficit on your cards. So there is a little bit of a bubble here that says, "Talk to me about." And in the spirit of creating dialogue, we'd like for you to write something in that space. So I think when I'm done here, I will write everything in my space here. Okay, so back to the theme and the keynote. So this year's theme is Sweden's twin transition. And we picked this theme because it's obviously very, very timely and it's very, very important. But also because it is a typical thing that we care about and want to get engaged in, not only because it's important, but also because it is very much an interdisciplinary topic, and it is a challenge that requires cross-sectional engagement, right? And we call this event, the yearly event that we call Dialogues on Digital, the reason we call it Dialogues is because we believe that a dialogue in society amongst us, amongst all the people that we meet, amongst all different sectors of society is essential both to push knowledge boundaries and to drive the changing of minds that is necessary, and also to pursue impactful solutions to the challenges that we're facing. So we believe very much in dialogue as if you will, a prototypical type of knowledge creation and knowledge development that has obviously thousands of years of tradition, right? Intellectual tradition. So we're also convinced that in order to address these challenges, we need to think broadly and act pragmatically. And who better to help us with this than our keynote speaker, Professor Frank Geels. So Frank he holds the Eddie Davis Endowed Chair in Sustainability Transitions at the University of Manchester. And he's a thought leader on systemic innovation and socio-technical systems. Consults with for the European Commission, and is absolutely highly influential as a scholar on all of these topics. So we're delighted to have Frank with us here today. We, of course, I talked about cross-sectional and interdisciplinary. I think the word socio-technical is a word that is dear to my heart, because I think if we look at the history of technology, we tend to have an understanding of technologies that starts out as very technology-centered. So whenever there's a new technology that we are facing, we tend to think of this technology as some sort of tool that we can just apply and solve all problems with. And over time, as we get more sophisticated, these tools are not tools, they're intellectual infrastructure. They are intertwined into socio-technical systems, and they become the part of how we think about the world, right? And I think it's only then that we really create enduring and profound value with technologies, and that requires that we see this process as fundamentally socio-technical. So that also means, of course, that innovation technology can be part of a solution, but it cannot be the solution. And if we're not careful, it can be the opposite of a solution, obviously, as you know, I'm sure. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me. With that, I would like to hand over to Frank. And please join me in giving Frank a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Magnus. Thank you so much, Magnus, for this kind and generous introduction, and for the invitation as well to speak to you all at this exciting event. I'm a professor of sustainability transition, so I investigate long-term, large-scale system changes, and I've been looking at digital innovation increasingly because it's an important and interesting area. So that's the topic of my talk, green transitions and the role of digital innovation. So historians of technology have looked at the last 250 years. This is done in long wave theory, and they distinguish different waves in how our economy has developed, from cotton in the beginning, then steam, steel, to the second industrial revolution in the late 19th century, then petrochemicals, combustion engines, and now the sixth Kondratiev wave is all about sustainability and digital. So this is widely seen as the two new growth areas of the next 20, 30 years. So understandably, this has given rise to high hopes of the twin transition, where the digital transition will reinforce the green transition, and hopefully the green transition will mutually reinforce the digital transition, leading to all kinds of reports, and I've just selected two here. One is from the European Commission, Twin Transitions, A Green and Digital Future, the World Economic Forum. There's loads of other events on this topic, and the hope, of course, is that this is a win-win situation where they both positively reinforce each other. However, in the academic literature, there's also increasing sort of warnings or cautions of the digital transition. So here are just some titles from academic articles. One is about digital platforms and energy, talking about promises and perils. The digital transition can be a paradigm shift or a technology fix, another paper. And the third paper at the bottom here talks about the intended and unintended consequences. So it's recognized it can be both a force of good, but it may also have negative implications. So I think it's not only probably a win-win situation, we also need to look at the potential negative side effects. So what I do in this talk is I'll start with a brief conversation, overview of the key trends in the low-carbon transition, where it's not all bad. There are some positive things happening, which I will briefly highlight. Then I'll talk about the roles of digital innovation in that transition, and then end with some opportunities and challenges. So one of the key trends is that global emissions still keep rising, so the whole of the emissions are still going up. But if there are now, in the last IPCC report, there are at least 18 countries in the world which have seen decreasing emissions for more than 10 years. So the bottom one in blue is the US, orange is Europe, and the gray one is other high-income economies. So you can see emissions have started to decrease in the rich world, in a way. The yellow line is China, which on its own accounts for 1/3 of global emissions. So basically, China is essential what's going to happen in the low carbon transition. And there too, there are now high hopes that this is reaching peak emissions and is beginning to stabilize, potentially already this year. But of course, at a global scale, understandably, as many developing countries industrialize and want to get refrigerators, etc., emissions are still going up globally. So what's been driving some of the decreasing emissions? One major driver is the accelerating transition in electricity, which is now really happening at quite a rapid speed. So these are some graphs on the left-hand side for Europe, the United States and China. So Europe has doubled its renewable energy percentage from about 20 to 30, 35. China comes next from 15 to 30%, and then the US is a laggard in this space, but has also doubled its renewable electricity production. Sweden, I've put there as well, is way ahead of many other countries, mostly because of hydro, obviously. On the right-hand side is a graph more on the absolute deployment. So even if Europe is leading in the percentages, China is well ahead in its actual deployment. On its own, almost installing as much solar and wind in terms of capacity as Europe and the US combined. So that's one of the reasons also China's benefited from scale economies, learning, costs coming down. So I'll have a slide later that China is absolutely dominating this space, and we're only quite belatedly waking up to this. So this transition is really accelerating and happening. Electric vehicles, since about 2019, it has a long history, of course, but is also really diffusing quite rapidly. On the left-hand side, you see a graph, total sales, which are in the millions, 12 million new car sales in 2023. The blue is China. So again, China is way ahead in its deployment of electric vehicles than the rest of the world combined. Again, creating both its own market and producing, and therefore have positive effects. On the right-hand side, we've got the percentages of sales. With China way ahead, China is now about 37% of all new car sales per year in China are electric. Europe has 22%, stagnating a little bit, which is causing sort of the pushback from car companies. The US, again, is sort of lagging behind. And here too, China is well ahead with about 60% of new car sales being electric. Norway even further, 93%. So this transition is also really happening at quite a rapid speed now, and I think it's sort of unstoppable. It's likely to go ahead even further. Another part of this story is that China is absolutely winning this race. Now, I won't take you through all of it, but China is red. So this is the global manufacturing capacity. Starts with solar at the top. China is producing about 90% of all solar panels around the world. A bit less for wind. Electric vehicles and batteries, similarly dominant. The heat pumps, a bit less dominant. But overall, China is way ahead of Europe in all areas, basically. And it's not that they've been advocating this and have not made it a secret since about 2010, but we never took it really serious. We always thought China's just doing cheap stuff, you know, and we do the real innovation and they do such cheap manufacturing. But they've really upgraded their skill. Their technologies are now better, and not only cheaper, also better. So the US woke up to this and introduced the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022. Europe is also waking up to this, introduced the Net Zero Industry Act in 2023. So it's now become a global innovation race. You know, I think this is the big story. I think that makes me a bit more positive than 5 years ago. This is now seen as a space where the big global powers are wanting to compete. It used to be the case, no, it wasn't really for the economy, it was seen as either the economy or the climate. And now this is seen, no, it's and the climate and the economy. And I think that's what makes me a bit more positive than I was before. So one of the main reasons that things are accelerating in these two areas, you know, there's loads of other sectors, of course, because of time limitations, I'm just focusing on these two. One of the main drivers is the tremendous cost reduction, both in batteries, which is the next slide, but also in renewable electricity. So for solar, the cost reduced, solar PV cost reduced by 68%. in 10 years. For onshore wind, 50%, offshore wind a bit less. But this was not foreseen. I think that's the interesting story of this. This was, if you look at the models or the economists 10 years ago, they would say, don't go in this space. It's too expensive. It's never going to happen. But policymakers went ahead anyway, despite the advice of economists and modelers. I think that's the interesting story. So it went down, not because of analysis, but because of deployment. So people actually started doing things. Policymakers introduced subsidies because they wanted to do something about the climate. That created small markets. Then companies started to invest. They started to sell things. And then you get learning by doing. You get scale economies. You get spillover effects, network externalities. And surprise, surprise, this was surprising to many of us how fast the cost went down. And they are now, in most parts of the world, renewables are cheaper than gas and coal. So the International Energy Agency now says, well, this is unstoppable. This is now going, in the last couple of years, for economic reasons, this is going forward. So 75% in 2021, so it's already outdated, 75% of new additions of electricity generating capacity was renewable. So, okay, it takes a bit of time to get rid of the old stock, but this is an unstoppable story. And this was through deployment. It was unforeseen, but once you start doing things, you get learning, you get more confidence, the cost of capital came down. So I think that's the big lesson from this transition in renewables. The same story happened in electric vehicles, where the price of batteries went down by about 95%. It briefly went up in 2022 because of inflation, and the cost of cobalt went up. But again, the last year it's gone down massively, partly because China is overproducing and you get dumping and cost reductions. But this, again, was a massive surprise. The cost reductions driving this forward. Also technological improvement. The batteries, initially there was a lot of hesitation. How far can we drive on a single charged battery? That has gone up a lot, so that anxiety has become a lot less. So I think that's the lesson of how, in a nutshell, of why things have gone quite well. So now I'll move to the digital innovations. And for that, I'll use the multi-level perspective on transitions, which is a framework I and others have developed. And the basic, in a nutshell, the basic idea is you need to look at the middle level. That's the systems we want to change: energy systems, food systems, mobility systems, industrial systems. And they're locked in and path dependent, usually just incremental change. So any radical innovation always emerges on the periphery of an existing system in small protected niches, whether or not this is the first jet engine or the first computer or the first solar or battery electric vehicles. They're all in small peripheries, small market applications, R&D. So in the first phase, it's all about experimentation, learning by doing, trial and error. Companies start, but also fail. And this can take a long time, this learning. Then the innovation stabilizes. There's a bit more conviction. There's a dominant design emerging. The visions become clearer. Investments become bigger. And then you get the diffusion phase, where costs come down really dramatically. But usually then it also requires some external shock, which can be an oil price, which can be a pandemic, which can be a war in the past, which helped to open up the regime. And then you get the transition happening, the new overthrowing the old. And there's lots of historical examples of this dynamic. So that's partly what I showed you with electric vehicles and renewables starting already in the 80s, but not diffusing really rapidly until 20, 30 years later. And I think what we now see, that digital is not just a small niche innovation. Digital has basically become a big landscape trend. It's a big overarching trend which is happening, and it's affecting forestry, agriculture, energy, mobility, self-driving cars, energy systems. So I think it's a big landscape development which is going to affect all the systems that are producing greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll distinguish 4 kind of roles or effects that this digital transition can have. 2 are positive and 2 are negative in this kind of framework. The first positive, it helps the functionality of niche innovations. The second positive effect is it helps the integration of niche innovations into the existing system. The third effect, which is more negative, digital also helps improve the existing system, the existing fossil fuel systems, which thereby becomes better, and it delays the transition. And the fourth effect is also digital is using a lot of energy. So there's a lot of energy demand going up. So I'll briefly go through these 4 effects. in the talk. So the first one is digital innovation is important and essential to improve the functionality of niche innovations. I'll talk about solar and wind, but you can equally talk about maybe forestry, I think we talk later, or agriculture, or energy-intensive industries. So remote sensors, for example, I just got some examples. Remote sensors, for example, can help detect when your solar panels or wind turbines are breaking down, don't work very well. So then you can start repair them. So that really helps with the maintenance and repair, makes it cheaper to operate. Artificial intelligence can be helped to better predict wind forecasting, so you can adjust your wind turbine, thereby optimize its functionality. 3D printing can help by making stronger wind turbines, also reduce the amount of waste that you need. So again, therefore you need less maintenance. Robotics helps with the manufacturing, can be much more efficient, but also again with the maintenance and the repair of wind turbines and solar cells. So there's all kind of, and these are just a few, all these innovations help the existing hardware, because I think most the emissions will have to reduce because of the hardware, heat pumps, electric vehicles, solar cells. So digital is more an add-on to those innovations which helps reduce emissions. The second positive effect is all these niche innovations. Well, we are now shifting to new kind of systems. So this is an example of the energy system, the electricity system. We are shifting to a much more decentralized electricity system, which is also intermittent. So that's the problem with solar and wind. You know, they don't always, they're intermittent. So you need to, the new energy system will have solar and wind, batteries for storage, smart grids, demand-side response, electric vehicle charging, and all these different technologies need to be woven together. So that's where digital technologies in the form of sensors, data flows, autonomous data processing, machine learning, all these digital tools help that new decentralized system function in a smooth way. And it's an absolutely essential enabler. The same if you move to self-driving cars, you need all the digital to make that work in an effective way. So this is a really important way, I think, that digital helps the integration of innovations and the new systems, make them work much more efficiently. A more negative effect is that digital, it doesn't just improve niche innovations, it can equally improve fossil fuel systems. We can do much better oil drilling, we can do much better oil refining, petrochemical firms, you know, and that reduces emissions a little bit, 5%, maybe 10%, so that's positive. But on the negative side, by improving that existing system, you are delaying the transition. Now, those companies will not see the need to reorient. It will partly distract the investments where they go. So I think that's a negative effect. It will delay the transitions and therefore keep the emissions and the fossil fuel systems in place. And the fourth one, of course, is that these data centers, artificial intelligence, quantum computing increasingly need huge amounts of energy. And some of the forecasts, 2030, 2040, see this as this is the major growth area of energy demand, which of course in itself then generates all kind of new emissions. Self-driving cars equally, makes it much more convenient and to drive. So therefore, it will push up. It could possibly extend energy mobility demand. You could even think of these taxis, which would just be driving around. So it drops you off at your work, and then your own car can be used as a taxi, and it will be driving all the time, basically. And another possible side effect, I think, which maybe we talk about later in the day, is that the whole reliance on cyber, on digital, will create a vulnerability of cyber attacks. In China, Russia, they are all very skilled in this space. I think Europe is still a little bit naive that this is all positive, but this is creating a new area of war, and it's quite likely we are going to move into a much more conflictual kind of space. So I think this whole digital cybersecurity dimension is also something to worry about. Conclusions. The green transition is clearly accelerating. This is seen as the future growth area, and it's now a global innovation race between China, Europe, US. Maybe Sweden as well. You know, you've got some successes, but Northvolt is also struggling, so it's not easy. I think the digital transition clearly is also accelerating, partly unrelated to the low carbon transitions, and this will continue anyway. It has 4 effects, I suggest, on the low carbon transition. 2 are positive, and 2 are more negative, as I discussed. Another interesting thing is the digital transition is still in an early phase, I would argue, and therefore there's lots of promises, you know, which product entrepreneurs need to make promises in order to attract attention and funding. But the literature on innovation also talks about hype disappointment cycles. You know, if you need to promise in the beginning, then you get this peak of inflated expectations. But if you then don't deliver a couple of years later, you get this trough of disillusionment that people think, well, you said this, but it's actually not happening. At the speed that you mentioned, the market is not coming. Elon Musk comes to mind in this respect. He's repeatedly done this, of course. He promised self-driving cars in 2017, said they would be on the road by 2020. Clearly, this is not happening. 3D printing, also not quite as transformative as people hoped. Mobility services could all be done, mobility as a service, but equally it's not really happening. So there's quite a few areas where there was lots of promises, but it's not happening to the degree that we once hoped. So I think this is maybe something that we pick up later in the discussions, which innovations are really transformative and which are maybe a bit overhyped, potentially. So the last slide, I think we are still in the early phase of digital. It is really hard to say how it's going to affect and transform. There are so many ways, you know, there are hundreds, if not thousands of digital innovations, so I don't think we can have a blanket conclusion and say it's positive or negative. It will be much more differentiated. But if I take the lessons from the low carbon transition, I'd say we can only find out by doing it. It's such a big beast, you know, you can't get sort of paralysis by analysis and just, if you just keep analyzing, it's so complicated. So at some point we need to just start doing things. This is what happened with the low carbon transition. Then we drive costs down, learning by doing. We develop more realistic visions. We find out what works in practice and what doesn't. And also I think it's important to really better understand the side effects and how we can mitigate those. So that's my sort of pitch. It's got potential, but I think we also need to have a more balanced and sort of nuanced view of what the digital can do with the low carbon transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. So, thank you, Frank, very much for a fantastic kickoff to our afternoon. Good afternoon again. My name is Valentina Tartari. I'm a professor here at the House of Innovation. And I would like to welcome you to the first session of our afternoon, which is titled Entrepreneurs Leading the Transition. So today, what we're going to do in this session is that we have an exciting opportunity to really dig deeper into the opportunities and challenges for entrepreneurs dealing with the twin transition, really navigating these dual goals of green and digital transition. And to do so, we are actually very lucky today because we're going to have a fantastic panel with us of experts that are going to really help us think through some of these opportunities and challenges and really think about this complex interplay between innovation, technology, and sustainability in an environment that is changing very, very, very rapidly. And as we explore these themes together, I invite you to think about, of course, and also think about some questions. And all of you on your badge have a little QR code that you can use to send us questions for our panelists. So please, as you listen to their talks, please think about some questions to share so that we have also some time during the panel to share them with them. And so, without further ado, I would like to welcome our panelists on stage. So let's give them a round of applause, please. And I must say that we are so happy to have them here, not only because they're internationally recognized experts in this area, but also because they all share a very special link to SSE, as they all are either students or alumni of our programs. So we're extra happy to have them on stage. So I will introduce them for you, and then we will start the conversation. So I'll start with the first speaker here, Linnéa Falck. She's the Deputy CEO, board member, and founder of Einride. Linnéa has taken Einride from a small startup to really a whole name company in terms of digital, electric, and autonomous transportation, so really at the core of what we're discussing today. She's a member of the Economic Forum's Tech Innovators community, a Forbes 30 Under 30 All-Star alumni, has been receiving a lot of awards for her innovation activities. And what also makes us very proud is that she's currently a student of our executive MBA. So thank you for being with us, Linnéa. Our next guest is Maria Smith, the Secretary General of Axfoundation. And Maria has more than 25 years of experience working as a leader and manager in the area of sustainability. Food, retail, engineering, a lot of things. The last 5 years, she has been the Secretary General of Axfoundation, which is an independent nonprofit organization really focused on sustainability with actually 2 key areas, future food and future material. Maria is a chemical engineer, but we're very happy also to say that she's an alumni of our executive MBA program as well. So thank you for being with us, Maria. And finally, our last guest, Stefan Kruk, co-founder and chairman at Kivra and at Good Cause, and the chairman at Flower. And Stefan has been founding and growing companies for the past 20 years, already starting as a master student here in these very rooms at SSE. Stefan is the co-founder and the chairman of Good Cause, a foundation that starts and manages businesses that give 100% back to good causes and to charity. And he's also the chairman of Flower, a company that is on the Impact 100 list. Stefan has a master's degree from SSE and also been named Alumni of the Year in 2023. Thank you for being with us. So now, as I also get more comfortable, I'll tell you what kind of homework I gave our guests. And I've asked our guests to reflect from their own perspective and their experiences on how digital technologies can actually advance and impact the green transition, and what is the role of entrepreneurs and also the ecosystem in which entrepreneurs operate. But at the same time, I've also asked them to be a bit critical and not just paint us too much of a rosy picture and think about the challenges and maybe even the risks, as Frank has mentioned, that come with these advances in digital technologies when we think about the green transition. As I said, after we hear from a first round of opening remarks from our panelists, we will have time for questions from the audience. So do not forget the QR code and send us your best questions. So thank you for joining us today. I'm sure we're going to have a fantastic conversation. So Linnéa, why don't you start?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here to start with. So many thoughts after the great keynote that we had just here before. It's really hard for me to try to summarize all of this in a few minutes. But I would say, like, to start with, first of all, the new technologies that's coming now is superior to what we had so far. And I think that's something sometimes that becomes a bit lost when we talk about sustainability. When we actually look, and we are a buyer of a lot, like hundreds of electric trucks. We buy it from China, we buy it from Europe, we buy it from several different companies. And what we see is that the Chinese electric vehicles and the trucks now, they're so good. Like, they're really great, and I think that's something sometimes we get lost in when we talk about it. I think a challenge that we have, especially coming out of Europe, is the financial structures and system. It's not very well, it doesn't really support innovation. Like, historically, if we look at Europe, we haven't really been great at creating new technologies. We've been really great at applying new technologies to new areas. We have some, this is not completely true when it comes to research or in medicine and so on, but historically, like digitalization, for example, it's an American technology that we have been very successful in how to apply it in a European context and also creating, of course, companies globally. So I think that's something that we don't really have that supports. And I think now when we can argue that, of course, that the AI is a niche within the digitalization, which I think is fair. I think now when we start to look at applied AI and what's going to come out of that, it's going to require taking a lot of risk, and it's going to require a lot of capital going into that. And I'm not sure if Europe is really in the state where we can support that sort of innovation. And that's a bit of a challenge, what I see. And what that means is that if we're not able to do that in European context, then we're going to have it from somewhere else, from China or from the US.
Wonderful. So, of course, thank you. This is, of course, the perspective of an entrepreneur, right? And I think that the issue of capital and how we finance also these high-risk activities with maybe returns that are very much in the future are, of course, at the core of a lot of discussion that we have in the European Union at the moment as well of our competitiveness. So, Maria, maybe you can also, you are a bit on the other side as well. So, of course, you and your organization, you support companies. So how do you see this, and what would be?
Yeah, I can just briefly mention, so sort of give you the contours of Axfoundation and who we are. We call ourselves a do tank, since we are extremely focused on the practical work. We are not a traditional foundation, which means that we do not support companies or researchers, etc., with money. Instead, we use our time and knowledge and run innovation projects within food and material, together with a lot of entrepreneurs, researchers, etc. So that's sort of where we are. And of course, we meet a lot of entrepreneurs, working closely with them. So I pick up a lot of their worries, and I can just sort of agree with you that one of the biggest challenges right now, I would say, is how do we actually finance the transition that is needed? The capital that is needed for that is, in order to have the opportunity to test and try, there's going to be a need of capital for that. So that is sort of one of the things that I reflected upon on the homework that you gave us. Another thing that that has taken a lot of my time is that we're in a hurry. Like the keynote said, there's from the climate perspective, we're in a hurry to actually transform the linear economic system that we have created. But it's not just climate. I mean, research says that we have exceeded 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries, whereof climate is one. In the last 50 years, we have tripled the use of natural resources, and only in Sweden we live as we have the resources of 4 planets. So I agree with the keynote speaker that there's no time for talking. Now is the time for doing. And their entrepreneurs and digitalization and the things that this technique and this new knowledge can actually bring about will be a very important enabler. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think that, of course, this sense of urgency, I think it's good to repeat it. And of course, we talk a lot about the green transition. We think a lot about sustainability. But of course, the discussion should be much wider and think about all the boundaries that, in a sense, we have crossed and we keep on crossing, and how we also think more holistically of these advances helping us solve these issues. Stefan.
Thank you, Valentina, and thank you, SEC, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be back. I've been back many times, but it's great every time. So we got the homework to reflect a little bit on the green transition with digitalization and the role of entrepreneurship in it. So to start with, reflection on digitalization, I think not much to add. I think the keynote very greatly said that there are 2 good things and 2 bad things. Quite frankly, to come back to Maria's end point here, we are exceeding our limits drastically, and there is no other way than to use digitalization and AI, etc., to be a lot more efficient on energy, on resources in general. So. Even though we have to be mindful about digitalization as well, that's the only way to a happy future. And the entrepreneur's role in this, I think the entrepreneurs have an extremely important role to play, quite easily described in the sense that they are better on taking risks, they are better on trying to be disruptive and really challenge things, whereas established organizations are better at, or they have power, but they work on optimization and doing what we are doing better, mainly. Whereas entrepreneurs can take risk, they can have long-term perspective. Large companies that are trying to disrupt their own industries won't always, or most of the time, I would say, they don't want to see those small projects. They don't show up in the numbers for many years. I just came from a meeting with the CEO of PostNord. Kira has kind of disrupted the Swedish mail system. So we're not enemies, we are actually sort of partners, so that they don't miss out. But she said today that still today, the transport that they do in Sweden, PostNord alone, is 200 laps around the world every day. Okay? So let's not do that with something that is better all digital, right? So it wasn't PostNord in the case of mail in Sweden that disrupted it, but it's not a unique case. It's over and over again. So that's the role of the entrepreneurs. I think that the changes that are happening are so dramatic that there are more transformation needed and will happen than ever before in such a short time, which means this is a golden age for entrepreneurs. All else equal. But let's have a systemic perspective as well, and not be overly dreamy about what digitalization will do, all the good stuff. It's also possible to do bad stuff. And I think as an entrepreneur, it's important to try to get the timing right. You can influence it a little bit, but you can't be too early, because if you're too early, sort of before leading edge is bleeding edge, and you are not sustainable yourself. And you can't be too late, right? Because then you have to move. But the problem is that a lot of ideas, a lot of startups. I met the mother of a winner. I was on a jury last night for Startup for Climate, and one of the mothers of the winners, that's a bright future going forward, is actually here. So congratulations again. But actually, adding that, I lost my story here. But I think I was coming to, there's a lot of ideas and new startups and entrepreneurs working on things where what they are working on is timely from a planetary perspective. But it's not timely from an economic system as we have it today all over the world. So it's, even though we are in a hurry, it's not timely, it's too early, because policies, etc., are not in place to stimulate and incentivize that we actually focus on the most important resources to focus on, the natural resources. So we have a system which was based and created before industrialization, and before 100 years ago, we doubled to 2 million, now to 2 billion people, then we doubled to 4 billion people, and we doubled again to 8 billion people, and we're heading to 10, and then we add all the industrialization. So but the system was created when everyone was convinced that we have to optimize on capital and labor. We need to optimize on natural resources, and that is not in the economic system. And that means that it's some of the things that are obviously good for the planet is not happening fast enough or not at all. Well, so I'm getting excited because I'm back here at school, we need, and already in the introduction by Magnus, this is an interdisciplinary field. We have House of Innovation, we have public policy, we have speakers coming up from Stockholm Resilience Center, so it's not only in the school, but glad that they're here. We need to work this out. We need to create a system which makes more of the things that need to happen, that we know needs to happen, actually happens. And in the meantime, the entrepreneurs, they will keep on trying, and when the timing is right, things will happen.
Wonderful. So let's remember entrepreneurs taking risk, but needing the support, not just from capital, but from a systemic level, and also what's our role in this in terms of also creating the economic system of the future that can actually support these activities. But I would like to hear some voices in a virtual way from the audience. So we got some questions from the QR code, so my colleagues will graciously actually give voice to the questions. So thank you, Mattia.
Yes, we have questions. So the first question is to Linnéa. As they try to ride the twin transition, should entrepreneurs in new ventures seek collaboration with large industry leaders or take a more competitive approach towards disruption?
I think going back to how venture was started, if we go back to like a Silicon Valley, where it was founded, it was actually part of big corporations that says that R&D should not be part of our in-house operations because it could probably be better if it's created in an external environment. And then we will found these companies if we believe that the idea is good and that we see that this could be a fit for us moving forward, and then they would acquire them. So that's kind of like how this whole ecosystem was started in the beginning. And I think that's kind of lost sometimes when we talk about this whole venture space, that venture is supposed to be an R&D function. And when you see that you find actually a product, perfect product fit, that's actually when you should really start collaborating with these big companies. I don't see that it should be competitive. I do think that there are a lot of competitiveness in the space because there's also a lot of interest from big corporations that they want to continue to have the structures that they've been working in for a very long time. And of course, they have a lot of investments that they don't want to just write off. So there's a bit of tension there. Yes. But I think the initial idea to say that we need an external organ to be able to be really competitive when it comes to innovation, I think that still stands and should be how we think about it.
Wonderful. Yes?
Yeah. A question for Maria. What sort of structural support do you foresee will be important in order to support applied digital innovation? You mentioned the hold-ups in the supply of capital. So what would you like to see going forward?
Oh, a tricky question. No, but I mean, of course, just going back to entrepreneurs that we meet and their frustration regarding not having access to capital, I think needs to be different roles during from idea into sort of a digital solution that can actually be scaled, and there has to be different capital. So of course, governmental innovation capital, but also private money and company money along the way. But I mean, I think there is there is the structure maybe in many ways, but due to turmoil in the surrounding world, etc., that kind of capital has been not removed completely, but at least minimized. And I think it should be the opposite, because it's now the money has to be there. So maybe not a complete answer to the question, but at least some reflections.
And this one is for Stefan. What are the biggest challenges in creating trust in digital platforms? And what kind of technology or approaches might address these challenges?
Maybe I step back to I also have one of my fellow board members of Kivra here as a speaker soon, but so maybe it's hard to generalize for me, not being in the research in this area. But if I look at what Kivra has done, it's working on trust on all levels. So starting off with ownership, I spent 1.5 years just thinking about who I would like to add as an ownership partner that could be trusted by everyone and work with all different, sort of all political colors, work with all different industry spheres or groups, whatever we have in Sweden. And came up that with the Wallenbergs having that trust, if you go to the very core of it. I would never have allowed SEB Venture to invest from the beginning, because they obviously are not independent. They have competing spheres of banks, but the very core of Wallenberg, they talk about landsgangligt, what's good for the country. That's the kind of owner that, and they're really long term. So that's the ownership level. Then, if you think about the consumers, we didn't have a brand or anything, so the consumers, they don't know about Wallenbergs either. I don't know. It's something next to the king or something. I don't know. It doesn't. They don't know who owns the company, right? But then we worked with the senders of information. So if you're a customer with Folksam or Länsförsäkringar or something, that's an institution that you have trust with. So we leaned on their trustworthiness. And in the end, we touch all consumers through all of their most trusted suppliers. And eventually, we build our brand through that. Then we use the identity mechanism that is the same as all banks in Sweden, Bank ID. So it's not one thing. And then you have to be consistent. Trust is also built over time. So I always sort of say that we shouldn't make fast movements. We have to move in the sense that everyone catches up with us. There are things that we can do legally, regulatorily, and so on. But and it's liked by many customers, but they might be too early in order for people to feel trust with it. Now I'm talking integrity and stuff like that because to the main extent, since I think many people here use Kivra, we are still viewing ourselves as the mailman. And as the mailman, you don't open the mail. In the future, I think many of you want to have a more intelligent partner than someone not opening anything. But we are carefully entering that space and with holding the hands. So it's a lot of things in that case, and I guess it's in most cases.
Thank you. So as we have only a few minutes left, I will now like to close our panel with a sort of inverse round. And I had sort of already told my speakers that I would ask them to give us in a sort of a closing nugget. But maybe I would also like to ask you, as we are in a university and hopefully there are also students with us, if maybe you can also give a message in a sense for the future entrepreneurs or maybe the future investors or the future business leaders of what they should think about if they approach this. So Stefan, this is like, you know, the terrible cold call of the professor who just throws in a question. So okay. I'll leave it to you to start.
Thank you so much. Well, I didn't know about the last part, but let's start with that. I think if we have to be optimistic because there's no way to just play the music while Titanic is going down. So it's going to be fine because we have everything on the planet which we need to fix things. I cannot foresee if it's the consumers or it's the employees or if it's the policymakers or if it's the finance market, what changes the game so that we can move faster in the right direction. I don't know, but I think it will happen. And so the call out is, like I said before, to those that are entrepreneurial and see things that should be changed, go for it. But sort of realize that you are sort of just very small and have to adapt. You can't be stepped on by a system which is not working. So you have to be a bit patient. Find the niches, which the keynote also talked about, even though you can solve larger problems. There will be a time. We have to be optimistic. But then we have to create. So moving to the other question, we talked about capital and so on. I think as we are currently moving about from a systematic sort of capitalism or market economy, I compare it to software. You need to update software. If you don't ever upgrade the software, you will have a system error, right? And that's what we are approaching. We need to upgrade the software of capitalism. And the software needs to be upgraded in the sense that it really directs the innovation, the capital, and so on. The capital will rush to many of the things that are now hard to fund if they are convinced that the direction is towards sustainability.
Thank you. Wonderful. Maria.
Well, it's nice to sit beside someone who is so optimistic because I'm optimistic as well, although I'm from the north of Sweden. So just imagine. No, but I will sort of start with the second question, not the new one. To summarize, what I would like to say is that the time of doing is now, which relates, of course, to all of us and also others. I mean, not just talking, now we have to do, and there's a window of opportunity there. And when it comes to sustainability, I think it's so important that we do not only talk about climate. Climate is important, but there are so many other areas as well that we need to address. And secondly, I mean, if I would sort of redo school, I would go the entrepreneurial way. I mean, learning about, there's so much opportunity nowadays to sort of get those tools during studies. And from my point of view, I love volleyball. And you know, the Swedish team who won the Olympics, because they made another game. They challenged status quo. I don't know if anyone else loves volleyball, but they did the game in another way. So they won. And I mean, that's the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. Challenge status quo, challenge business as usual. Do like the Olympic Swedish volleyball team, or like Zlatan Ibrahimovic or whoever. And that's sort of, yeah, it's a perfect role. And when it comes to your first question, yeah, I think it's so much. I mean, my daughter just did this UF company thing in her gymnasium, and I think it's so good. I mean, if you have all the possibilities, if you're sort of choosing your way within academia, so choose the entrepreneur way. That's
Wonderful.
my tip.
They've not been sponsored today. I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was really a surprise question. Linnéa.
I actually done UF-företagande, and I loved it. And I think that's also what got me into the path of entrepreneurship. I will say, though, quite harsh, being an entrepreneur is really, really tough, and it actually sucks most of the time. Just to be completely transparent, because I don't really like this image that you're like, oh, being an entrepreneur, you have so much free time. It's like you have no free time. That's like the difference. And so, but I do love entrepreneurship, because it comes with this sort of, you know, belief. And we saw what Frank was doing in the keynote when we talked about this, having a vision and an ambition to do something, and then you have this big backlash. And I think that's also what we've seen in the tech community when it comes to sustainability, is that now in a lot of parts of the world, they don't actually talk about sustainability anymore, because now it's like, no, we don't want to do that. And I think for me, that's why it's so important to say, we're not doing this because we want to be great people. We're doing this because it's actually a great technology. It's actually a superior technology, and that's the reason why we need to make this change. Of course, there's been a lot of initial investments, but as we also saw in the graphs, the price for batteries and across the board has come down so rapidly. So now you're actually going to be able to compete. And so coming back to being, and I think you both said it, like the time to be an entrepreneur is right now. There's so much great opportunities. It's really tough work, of course. But it's really cool, because you have all of these new technologies that comes into this space, and you can actually make a difference. And so I have to be optimistic, otherwise I wouldn't go up out of bed in the morning. But I truly believe that we're living in a fantastic time to be an entrepreneur.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's give a hand to our panel. Thank you so much. You can stay. So thank you for a great panel, a great discussion. Thank you for great questions. I'm sure you have more questions. So now I'll tell you what's going to happen once we finish this session. So the next part of the program, to give you a bit of energy and also a different environment, is going to be in the atrium. So once we move to the atrium, we're actually going to hear from some startups that are actually part of SSE Business Lab, working in the space of the twin transition. So some budding entrepreneurs, as we've been discussing about them. And then we will have time for conversation during a networking session. So how are we going to do the networking session? We're going to try something a bit different than usual. So if you look at your badge, you should have a little dot with a color that has been assigned randomly to you, not to the speakers because they host a table, but to the audience. And the color is actually the set of tables you're going to start your networking journey from. So let's say that you got a blue badge. You will start from the group of tables where Frank, Maria, and Stefan are. So you pick one of the three tables. You have a conversation, hopefully make new connections. And then after 10 minutes, we're gonna ring a bell, and you're gonna follow your color. Students are there to help you to move to another group of tables where you repeat. So you discuss, you make new connections, and after 10 minutes, you'll move to the last group of tables. So we're trying to maximize conversation and connections here, and so please take advantage of that. At the same time, there's coffee and tea and fika, so get some energy as well for the rest of the conversation. So in 10 minutes, more or less, the startups are going to be on the stage in the atrium telling about their work. So I'll meet you out there, and then we'll continue with our session. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome back. I hope you have had engaging conversations and productive networking. In the previous session, we have focused on the role of entrepreneurship in driving the twin transition. Now it's time to focus on the role of digital technology in advancing the sustainable development of organizations, industries, and society. I will begin sharing some reflections to set the stage, followed by 2 insightful speeches. We will then move to a dynamic panel discussion with experts with diverse perspectives. There will be time for questions from the audience after the speeches and at the end of the panel, so please continue submitting your questions on VooClub. If we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. This is the most famous line of The Leopard by Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. Set in the 19th century Sicily, the novel depicts a society in transition from an aristocratic rule to a rising bourgeoisie. In it, a young nobleman tries to persuade his uncle, a prince, to bless his marriage with the daughter of a nouveau riche merchant. His logic that if they want to preserve their power and position, they must adapt, even if it means doing things they once would have resisted. In approaching the topics of today, I wonder, is the green transition at its core a way of keeping things as they are? Are we like the characters of The Leopard, adapting to avoid a deeper transformation? Consider what staying the same means today. Constant economic growth, concentrated wealth, sustained resource extraction, and the prevailing faith in humanity's power to innovate our way past ecological limits. We welcome sustainable practices so long as they fit seamlessly into our economic and social systems. But is that enough to confront the crisis of our time? Can we afford to pick and choose what we change? Do we need to embrace a paradigm shift, a fundamentally new way of living, producing, and consuming? And if so, what kind? Now enter the twin transition. What happens when green meets digital? With digital technology, anything can happen, and that's the fun part. The capabilities of digital technologies often resemble superpowers compared to their analog counterparts. They're transforming the value, use, and experience of our everyday products. Just think of what our phones mean to us today, how we promote ourselves, how we capture and share moments or find love. Entire industries like retail and entertainment have been disrupted by tech-savvy new entrants. And yet, in other cases, digital technology has simply offered more of the same, enhancing what already exists, much to the delight of today's leaders, who are already the best at the same. What will happen when digital technologies begin to mediate our relationship with nature and regulate the extraction and use of its resources? Will they just enhance the status quo or truly transform it? Here, I believe, we find a paradox in the twin transition. The most advanced technology apps with the best R&D, those that could be in the driver's seat, are often quite conservative. They see new technology as a tool to defend hard-won advantages, and they take a narrow view of sustainability as win-win. environmental or social initiatives with a profitable business case. And then there is the other side of the paradox, that the most innovative ideas aren't necessarily driven by technological research, but rather by efforts to shift cultural, cognitive, and social values towards new way of producing, consuming, interacting with our environment. These shifts can reveal a greater value in sustainability, tied to a different kind of business case than the one we are familiar with. While still partly instrumental, this new business case might be rooted in an appreciation for the intrinsic worth of nature for its own sake. This is perhaps the hardest part of transitioning, one we are already struggling with. Editorials call for profound changes in our ways of living, yet the news is full of setbacks. A green policy by the European Commission gets delayed another year. Multinational scraps its ambitious 2030 emission targets due to change market conditions. At COP meetings, envoys negotiate night and day over whether climate commitments should or shall. Progress feels slow, yet history teaches us that revolutions can come unexpectedly and transform the world before we realize it. At the turn of the 20th century, New York streets were covered in manure from 150,000 horses. Urban planners felt defeated, unable to imagine a solution. But within 20 years, cars had largely replaced horses, solving one impossible problem, only to create the new ones that haunt us today. Now the manure is in the air and doesn't smell. What magic machine will dissolve it? This cautionary tale reminds us that externalities and unintended consequences accompany any new technology. True win-wins are rare, if they even exist. In the Leopard, the ruling aristocracy saw which change was coming, but doubted it would improve anything. To them, it was simply a new form of opportunism under the guise of progress. In the twin transition, we know even less what this new will bring and will be. Will it usher in another form of opportunism, or perhaps a new idealism? Our hope is that it brings lasting improvement. To help us better understand we have brought together experts with diverse perspectives, here to unravel the interplay between the twins and explore what the future might hold. Our first speaker is Lotta Liro, President and CEO of Södra, Sweden's largest forest owner association. She also serves as the newly appointed chair of the Swedish Forest Industry Association. Lotta's impressive career spans roles at McKinsey & Company, IKEA, and most recently, the President and CEO of Clas Ohlson. We are especially proud to welcome Lotta back to your alma mater, where you earn your master's degree in business and economics. Lotta, very welcome on stage.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And yes, it is good to be back. And I used to sit up there, and this is the first time here. So it feels a little bit special, actually. So thank you so much. Well, I think working with our forests and everything it can become has never been more exciting than right now. And of course, it is because our forests, they are really a key contributor and a big possibility for addressing some of the greatest challenges of our time. It is, of course, about climate change. It's also about the global loss of biodiversity. And both of these areas require bold and, I think, speedy decision-making. And we are faced with this also in times of geopolitical tensions and economic uncertainties. But how we handle this and how we as an industry act will make a big difference. I believe that business as usual will not be enough when there is, I would say, a structural lack of wood in relation to an increasing need of wood-based products. And at the same time, we do need a growing carbon sink, a necessary carbon sink, growing forests in order to create the right platform for the future. So it will be essential for us as a society to use the whole tree in the best possible way and create more value. And I do believe that digitalization is a good companion to have on this journey. Södra is, as has been said, then Sweden's largest forest owners association. We have 52,000 family foresters as our members and owners. Over the years, these family foresters, the association has also built its own industry group. And we have had the tradition of really working hard on maximizing the value of each tree that comes out of our owner's forest. So apart from producing sawn timber and cross-laminated timber for construction, or pulp for textile and for paper, we are also using sawmill bark, branches and tree tops in producing bioproducts or different type of energies. The water from the pulp board, there's a lot of steam and a lot of hot water when you produce pulp, and that we use for district heating for the nearby communities or even for greenhouses. And excess steam is also used over turbines to then produce electricity to the grid and so on. So really we have a tradition of making the most out of every tree. But lately we have reinforced this using mainly, I would say, two means. The first one is that we have decided to extract more biochemicals out of our trees. The trees contains all type of magic things. I could spend, a whole afternoon talking about that, but I won't. But there are a lot of biochemicals in the trees, and what we have decided is to actually extract them out of the trees and sell them as products, because in many cases then they can replace fossil alternatives, and there is now a great market for this, and we need it as a society. And this is things like biomethanol, tannin that you can use to soften leather, or lignin that can replace a lot of fossil-based materials in plastics, adhesives, and so on. So this is one of the things that we're working hard on, putting a lot of money behind to actually do this. The second thing is that we are then intensifying the use of digitalization and AI to increase the value of every tree. And I would like to emphasize this. This is not sort of an incremental business as usual effort. It's really transformation. And you will hear me mention technology, but I want to also say that I will talk about people and culture. Because I believe if you want to transform a business, if you want to transform a value chain, you also need to work with the people and the culture to achieve change. But I would like to start in an even bigger perspective and point at myself and maybe some of the people in the room. We have heard already today that Europe is lagging behind both the US and Asia when it comes to how we embrace and adopt new technology. And I think that we as business leaders have a big responsibility here to actually close this gap in how we run our businesses. It needs to happen in our businesses. We cannot point at others. And I think this is something we can change, and therefore we must do it. During my time in retail, I got sort of first-hand view on how quickly digitalization can change an industry. And I do think it is because you're so close to the consumer. And the fight for consumer love and consumer wallets makes it sort of, you have to do it. For us, it's a little bit further ahead, and therefore it takes more time. But I did bring a lot of the experiences and the learnings I got from seeing e-com happen, from seeing digital marketing push out physical leaflets and other things out of the mailboxes. I did bring that to Södra, and when we started, we didn't really have a detailed plan. We had a clear vision that we believed that this could really add value to us. And we had lots of curiosity, I would say, in the organization. That's how we started. The biggest potential we actually saw in how we made decisions about how to maximize the value of each tree. It's the biggest cost in our operation. It's the biggest value for our owners. So it's natural to start there. And it was about making the decision-making more holistic. That was the whole thing. Another area which might seem a little bit far-fetched but is very close to our hearts is the work around health and safety. Many of the operations that we have from the forest through our factories is high-risk environments. So making sure that we have health and safety high on the agenda is another important part of this work. We wanted to do this. We wanted to become faster. We as an industry, we're very long term. You know, a tree, it's 80 years before it's done, so it's easy to become a little bit slow. We want to be faster. We want to be able to turn around things faster. That was another goal. And all in all, also do this whilst becoming more competitive, of course. One thing that was important for me when starting off this was to go directly into the core processes. And the purpose with that was when you drive transformation, you need potential to work with. So that was one, having areas with big potential, but also to have people working in these areas with curiosity, who wanted to do it. And the reason for having these two sort of in mind was then that we needed good examples, and I believe truly nothing can beat a good example, and we wanted to get those on the table. I will give you some now. Maybe the prime one that we have is our flight tower. It's a digital twin of the whole value chain that we have created with the purpose to maximize the value of every tree. And the idea of a flight tower is that I believe very much in a decentralized organization with heavy business ownership far out in the organization. But we wanted to create the flight tower so wherever you work in the organization, whatever business you sit in, you can make your decision with the whole tree, with the whole value chain in mind. And that is what we have done in the flight tower. When we kicked off this initiative, one of the key things, and maybe one of the most difficult things, was that we needed to combine people with really deep expertise in our business and in our operations with data science. People coming with completely different backgrounds into the same team. And from a leadership perspective, how do you create then an environment of inclusion where you can marry together these two competence areas? But that has been key for us. So it's a lot of work on the ground to push these changes, and then maybe the name Flight Tower sort of is a contradiction to that. But for us, it was really a way to show that you need holistic decision making in order to maximize the value of every tree. Key in this has been that we have injected a lot of AI capabilities that allows us to do scenario planning. And in the years we've been living through now all together with the war in Ukraine, but also bark beetles, which maybe not affect so many of you, but affects my everyday life and forest owners' everyday life, is an example of where you need to quickly be able to adapt. And having this digital twin and being able to do scenario planning not once or twice a year, but actually twice a week makes a very big difference. Another example is then Jörgen. I met Jörgen 2.5 years ago when I was doing a factory visit, which I love to do and do regularly. And he has been working with health and safety in Södra for 25 years. Jörgen came up to me and said, "Lotta, I have a dream," he said. I would like to take all the risks observations that we have, all the incidents that we have, all the accidents that we have, and pull all that data together. And maybe we could actually direct our proactive work in health and safety in a better way. And now Jörgen's dream has come true. So we actually have a chatbot called Jörgen, in the memory of Jörgen. And what it does is it helps us prioritize where we put our efforts to prevent an accident. It helps us foresee accidents. Where is it likely to happen? We have 10 years of data now behind this, and we can share it across our operations. We would never have been able to do this unless we have leveraged new technology at hand. So I think it's important. These projects, they do not only lift efficiency and helps us maximize value of the raw material, it's also a means to raise standards in so many other areas. Another example, which is obvious, is of course that we at Södra, we have the assignment to all the time support forest owners in their daily work. And of course, by nature, forestry is very analog, right? But we're also working heavily to use digitalization in a way to support this part of the business. And we have an app for our forest owners called Min Skogsgård, My Forest Farm in English, which is then aimed at making life easier, helping decision-making out in the forest. And one of the things we added to this work a couple of years ago is that we formed an investment company in Södra with the assignment to then find technological developers who could actually help us inject new technologies and support into this. One of the startups that we are working with is Nordic Forestry Automotive. And this company is developing the next generation operating systems for forest machines. So you imagine the forest machine, the person driving a forest machine is taking more decisions by minute than a pilot running an airplane, just so you have the perspective clear. And what this system does is that it has sensor technology that helps optimizing when you do thinning in the forest, which is a really important part of making sure that you get the maximum value out of your forest. You save the right trees, the ones with the highest value. So once this technique becomes more operational, it will increase the value or the density, you can say the value density of the forest, and it will give a completely new level of transparency to our forest owners as well. So these are just some examples of a journey that we have just started. And for me, when driving digitalization, it's very much like sustainability. It has to be at the core of what you do. It has to be integrated in whatever you do. It cannot be sort of a thing handling on the side by some people. And in order to do that, I would like to finalize by giving a couple of critical preconditions that I think are important in getting to that place. And the first one is that all the leaders in the organization, in the company, need to understand what this is about. And I can just, if I take myself as an example, it was 30 years ago that I sat up there, and we didn't learn a lot about environment or sustainability or digitalization, actually. So I went through school knowing very little, and I think many in my generation are the same, right? So we need to learn. And giving leaders the right knowledge base is also a way for them to give them confidence to lead. Because you cannot, as a leader in an organization, delegate this to someone else. It's not the project management assignment. The leader has to lead also this. And we have to give them preconditions to do that. That is super important. The second thing I would like to bring up is that if we can invest heavily into this area, but if we don't address all the cultural dimensions of it, then we won't get value for the money. So you need to keep track of what's the cultural barriers, what are the power structures that are holding us back, and you need to be able to take those decisions also to change that in order to get moving. And don't underestimate the informal structures. Digitalization, I don't think it is, it's not adapting to change. And we have to put ourselves in the driver's seat. And my assignment is and Södra's assignment is to make sure that we maximize the value of all forest farms in southern Sweden. So it is our job to use also digitalization to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Lotta, for a deep and broad speech about digitalization in forestry. I have one question from the audience.
Sure.
How do you see the ownership of Södra has supported your ability to transform compared to a public company?
I think that I think engaged owners, I love engaged owners, no matter what ownership structure you sit in. It can be privately held, I mean, you need to have owners of, I think, that are not only interested about the P&L and the quarterly report, but actually interested in the business. And at Södra, we really have that. So I think that helps because then you're actually interested in also how this creates value. Because it is, as was mentioned before, it does cost quite a lot of money to do this, and it's not always obvious what the short-term effects are, even though I think we also have a sort of responsibility to show that. But I think being able to combine a long-term view and interest in the business and what it really means, I think that is really important.
Thank you, Lotta.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is now my pleasure to welcome Associate Professor Thomas Hahn to the stage. Thomas is a principal researcher of environmental social sciences at Stockholm Resilience Center at the Stockholm University. A recognized authority in his field, Thomas has led many large research projects in ecological economics and frequently shares his expertise with the Swedish parliamentary committees and a wide range of societal actors. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about some problems or challenges
about green growth. And I start with the efficiency paradox. Efficiency is central, it's key for sustainability. We need energy efficiency, we need efficiency in natural resources, absolutely key. And it has to be absolute decoupling. Decoupling is a measure of efficiency, how much you can have production being decoupled from emissions and resource use. So it's an efficiency measure. And the decoupling must be absolute, it must also be sufficient to achieve the climate targets, for example. So it's not enough with just 1 or 2% reduction of emissions per year. It must be maybe 4 or 5 or 6. The problem here is that much of this efficiency gain is actually consumed by increase in production and consumption. So what we think that, efficiency will make the job, it will solve the problem of climate change. Yes, it will do that, but it needs some help. And because otherwise, it will just be eaten up by even expanding economy. So what are these rebound effects? Well, it's an old theory. You can imagine the European Union. The Commission is forcing European car producers to reduce emissions per car, per kilometer. So all the cars sold now have much less emissions per kilometer. And this makes it cheaper to drive your car. So for the same distance, you use 20% less fuel, diesel and petrol, and that saves money. What do you do with this money? And you are happy, I paid less for filling the tank. I actually saved some money, I can put it in my bank account. Maybe I can work a bit less. So if you don't do anything about this, if ceteris paribus, the only thing you have is the efficiency gain in fuel, then actually GDP is reduced because you buy less petrol and the money that is left, you don't do anything with this money. But of course you do something with the money. For example, you drive a bit more of the car because it has become cheaper to drive. So maybe some of this effect will be consumed by this called direct effect, by increasing your car driving. But you will still reduce petrol use by 12% because you have inelastic demand. In another sector like aviation, you might have more elastic demand. So then you consume the whole efficiency benefit by flying more. That is called the Jevons paradox. I had a lot of text on this slide, but you took away, the organizers took away the text. I think it's good actually because it was too much text. So beside the direct effect, the direct rebound effects, you have indirect or economy-wide effects, which means that when energy becomes cheaper and natural resources become cheaper, what is the incentive to economize with these things? So the whole direction for business and society is to economize with labor. So you cut down labor, having more digitalization, robotization, automatization. Just in the forest, you have all these big machines replacing people with the motor saw. And that's called progress. Then you're rational, you're being efficient. But it's bad for the environment because you're wasting energy, you're wasting natural resources, and that's cheap. And I've been talking about circular economy for all my life. I was standing on another scene together with Anders Wikman some weeks ago, and he's been talking with that 20 years more than I have because he's 20 years older. And this whole circular economy is such a wonderful idea. And it doesn't work because the incentives are not there. It's too cheap with energy and natural resources because we have been very successful in efficiency. And how can you actually stop the rebound effects? Oh, I can ask you first, is it good, the rebound effects, or is it bad? Maybe it depends on who you are, but in economics it's bad. At least in environmental economics textbook, it's bad. Because the promise of technology, the promise of efficiency is not being delivered. Because you have the rebound effects making us use more of these saved resources. But if you don't have rebound effects, you don't have economic growth. What happens then with all the trade unions or the companies who want to sell this? Okay, we are having less petrol per car, but if we can have more cars, or if they can drive more, then we can sell more petrol and diesel. And that's what the whole economy is geared for,
to just produce more and more stuff and consume more and more stuff. Is that really what we want? If you ask a Danish person driving his bicycle, he's commuting with a bicycle, he used to drive with his car, but now commuting with a bicycle. And you say to him, hey, man, you succeeded to dematerialize growth. Now you have a car, you have a bike instead of a car, you're using less resources, using less fossil emissions. Great, and they would say, vad fan talking about? I'm driving my bicycle because it's simpler, it's actually cheaper, and the Copenhagen has made so much city planning, so it's easy to have a bicycle today. And it's actually promoting my health as well. So my well-being is actually increased. Is it possible to imagine that well-being can be increased, although his contribution to GDP has been decreasing because he's not driving a car anymore? He's actually spending less money and less footprint. What I'm interested in is not GDP, I'm interested in the material footprint and carbon footprint, because I'm a sustainability researcher. And taxes, yes, taxes is the way to stop it. We're not doing that really. We're not having taxes on fossil fuels as we should have. We're not having we're not having an environmental fiscal reform. It's not been doing in Sweden or European Union or in the world. So what we actually have, we are welcoming the rebound effect because we want to have growth. So we are not having a real Schumpeter transformation. Schumpeter said 70 years ago, we should have a creative destruction. So the creative stuff is to expand investments in solar and wind and electrification and so on. At the same time, we must divest in the fossil sector. We don't do that because we want to have growth. If we instead use all this efficiency gain to only promote dematerialization, to save ecosystems, to reduce our pressure on the planet and the carbon footprint, to achieve Paris Agreement, then we would have much higher prices and taxes on fossil fuels. We would close down Bromma Airport and use other transformations. And hopefully we can do that with still high level of well-being. Why should we go down well-being? But we have to be much more innovative to think of how can we solve this climate crisis and crisis with nature and biodiversity and still maintain a high level of well-being. That asks some changes in design, not just the small modifications on the margin. So we need not marginal change, we need transformational change. And this is possible. Did I have another one? Yeah. And then, yes, thank you. Now we need to have some, I'm saying that the way to actually control the rebound effects is to go back to the polluter pays principle, to take it seriously. I didn't show the slide here, but actually the polluter pays principle is going down. We're having less taxes in Sweden and European Union of the total taxes. So environmental taxes are being reduced. We have to increase taxes. But do people like carbon taxes? Do you like carbon taxes? Yes, of course, you're economist. So we know how to internalize external costs. That's chapter 22, I think, still. So if you have a bad teacher, you never come to that chapter. But of course, you know this. But in general, people don't like carbon taxes. They hate it. It's one of the most unpopular ways. We made a big survey in Sweden with 5,000 respondents, asking them, do you actually support increased carbon tax on fuel? And the baseline response here in blue said no. 44% said no, we don't like it. And 25% even said no, I hate it. So they said 1 on a 1 to 7 scale. If you answer 1, then you really hate something. So we have 1/4 of the population who really hates increased carbon taxes. But when you ask them, would you like this carbon tax increase if people with low income and people in rural areas would be compensated for the cost increase? Then something magic happening. So 50% of the people who said absolutely no, said 1. they change and become positive. And 1/4 of the number one say answer number 7 instead. So they go from one extreme to the other extreme. Why is that? How come you suddenly become strong supporters of increased carbon tax? Well, it's because all the research, in our research and international research, say that people can accept carbon taxes, 1, if they think it's effective, it does have effect on emissions, and 2, it is perceived as fair. And fairness is very subjective. We collaborate with civil society organizations in Sweden to understand what fairness is, because philosophically it could mean anything. You know, liberal philosophy and socialist philosophy, it could mean anything, fairness. It's very subjective. So we use the words perceived fairness. It's up to you to say what is fair. And people, it is the most important question to make public acceptance for radical climate politics, is to make sure that you have a policy package that puts carbon taxes within some kind of compensation, so that people can say, yeah, actually, I understand we need this, but I don't want to be hurt so much. And if I belong to the low income, or I live far away from Stockholm or somewhere in the rural areas, I need my car. Then we have to accept that. And not just, as many politicians say, that, oh, there isn't a public acceptance for carbon taxes, let's not do it. Let's have a low price on the pump. It's called that price on the pump, the fuel price where you buy it should be cheap. That's what the government says. And all research says the opposite. Let's increase the price at the pump and then compensate people who can arguably are losers. So there are many ways to actually, and then you can handle the rebound effects. Because the rebound effects, and then when people enjoy the efficiency gains and they get some money left over because it's cheaper with petrol when you buy an electric car, it's even cheaper to drive. What do you do with this money? Well, if it's very high taxes on fossil fuels and natural resources, then of course you do something else. You go for a massage, you take a spa or something else, preventive health, or you go dancing. Because that is a sustainable lifestyle. And we must look for what is a sustainable, good lifestyle. That should be our driving star. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for shedding light on this interesting phenomenon of rebound effect. We have one question from the audience, which is, do you think we need a totally new economic system, or can we integrate new dimensions in the old GDP system?
That's a good question. I think definitely we don't need a new economic system. I can't see any better system than the market economy. But we have some obsession on GDP growth. And for some reason, I can understand that if I was a politician, I would also think GDP growth is very important, because I have responsibility to deliver healthcare, social security, education, and so on. And how can I do that if I don't have a budget? But we have to ask, what is the purpose in economics? What is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of society? Is it to just continue growing the economy? Since 1990, we have increased GDP per capita by 50%, inflation adjusted. So we should be 50% happier now. Are we? If that was the key, then we should. But we know from research that the most important thing is relations for well-being. Relations and health, and they're related. Good relations is good health. Maybe we should do something more about these things. So we need to have discussion, and that's what we try to do with civil society in Sweden. Ask them, what is a good life? Good income, of course. That's what you do in trade unions. Yeah, but besides a good income, because we need decent incomes, of course. But should we just promote growth at all cost? And that is the question we have to talk to our students. We have to have these discussions. So we don't need to have extreme solutions like degrowth. What is that? I'm not interested in degrowth. I'm interested in sustainable human well-being.
Thank you, Thomas. I will listen to you all day, but we need to move to the panel.
Yes,
Thanks for your speech. All right, so we have now arrived at the panel discussion, Going Digital, What's the Future of Forest and Forestry? So the purpose of this session is to discuss practical examples of how digital technologies are applied to advanced sustainable development, exploring opportunities and limitations, benefits and challenges. Our goal with the panel is to be as concrete and as specific as possible, which is why we focus on a particular context: forest, forest management, and the forest sector. Forests cover 70% of Swedish land, making the forest sector a central part of Swedish society, culture, and economy. Forests are also at the heart of a vigorous debate in both Sweden and Europe about how to balance their economic, environmental, and social values. There are diverse viewpoints and visions on this issue. Alongside this debate, there is a lot of R&D activity and investments in order to develop and adopt new, especially digital technologies for forest management. So we want to explore the role of digital technology here, not only because we care about forests, but also because the insights gained from digitalizing this sector can be valuable to other natural ecosystems, but also to other industries that use natural resources directly or indirectly. With that, I'd like to invite our esteemed panelists at this stage, please. Left to right, Sverker Danielsson. Sverker is the program director of the Mistra Digital Forest, which is a world-class research initiative leveraging digitalization to advance sustainable development in forestry. You are at the Swedish Forest Industry Federation, and you have more than 20 years of experience in industrial research within the bio-based sector. Welcome, Beatrice Rindevall, chairperson of the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation, which is the largest non-profit environmental association in Sweden with over 200,000 members. You bring extensive experience in environmental issues, including your work on fisheries policy at the Baltic Water Foundation and your role at the Research Council Formas. Let me introduce you, Adam Aliarida. I was better before. Co-founder and chief operating officer at Tribula, which is a fast-growing company established to help forest owners unlock their forest full potential and more equitably share the value they generate. In recognition of your entrepreneurial work, you received the prestigious Årets Nybyggare Award in 2018. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And finally, let me welcome Maria Norström. Maria is a digitalization leader at Skogsforsk, which is the Forestry Research Institute of Sweden, jointly funded by the Swedish state and the forestry sector. For your extensive and impactful research, you have been elected as a new member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, EVA. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question for all the panelists to break the ice, which is, what is your organization's vision for the future of forest, and how does digital technology support achieving this vision?
Me first?
You go.
Thank you. Well, we really work in, the forest will serve both as a base for delivering important material for the society, but also being a place for high and rich biodiversity, as well as being a place for where people want to spend their time and which is good for the health. So that's really the vision, you could say, to increase all the three, and we can never use or choose one of them. On the digital tools that we are developing in Mistra Digital Forest, you could title the areas around, one is being evaluation of the forest, being more detailed in what we know about the state of the forest and what is growing and where and in what variations. And then also planning the forest operations in a detailed way and a more efficient way. And then also in the actual executing the forest operations. So those three areas, I would say, is the direct value from digital tools.
Yeah, and data are central for all of these.
Right.
Beatrice.
Well, we would really love to see that the forests are healthy ecosystems that provide us goods, but also other stuff. The forest is our immune system, or one of the immune systems we have. It provides also drinking water and the air we breathe, and we need biodiversity in the forest to get that. And we also need resilient forests that can withstand the climate change that we are already seeing today.
And digital technology, in what way can help?
Digital technology can really help in gathering data. We need not only data about the economy that the forest can provide, but also the species that are in it, and which forest we should really aim to preserve, and which one that we can have more of the products from.
Yeah, especially since natural processes are invisible and silent, so you need advanced technology to actually capture this data.
Exactly.
Adam, what's Tribula's vision?
Yeah, so for us, we have taken a different approach, because in Sweden we have 330,000 forest owners. So our approach has been to give back the power over the forest to the forest owner, the people that's owning the forest, and giving the forest owner the opportunity to see all the values in their forest. So we want to give back the decision and the thinking and the use of the forest to the forest owner. So basically we give the forest owner all the opportunities with a digital solution.
So a full picture.
Exactly.
Maria, what about Skogsforsk?
Yeah, a lot of good things have already been said, of course. But for us, it's of course really important that we are still a country of forests, so that we have growing and resilient and healthy forests, even also in the future. This is a very long-term perspective that you take on when you think about forests. And also for us as a research institute, we have partner companies ranging from the largest forest companies and the forest owners associations to very small forest owners. So there's quite a wide range of stakeholders that have thoughts about the forests, and we cannot say that you should do this and that. We have laws and regulations, but we want to make sure that we bring tools and data to the table so that you can make wise decisions, so you don't have to guess what is the effect if I do this and that. So I think digitalization and data can bring a lot of value in that. So bringing more facts to the table so that we can make wise decisions.
Yeah, and confidence in making these decisions.
Exactly. And I would also like to add that these tools will not just replace people. It's more to empower the people in the system to make better decisions. And
Sverker, in your research program, you have multiple projects. Could you tell us a bit more about the one that you believe has the highest transformative potential, and what complex challenge is digital technology in that project trying to solve?
I will try. Yeah, they are very much connected to each other, but I will try to describe the aim with the program. We are now running to the second phase, which means for us to be more focused on implementation of the technique that we have developed throughout the years. And for me, the groundbreaking area is research connected to laser scanning data. It's a technique to collect data from aeroplanes or drones or from the ground, which can be a base to serve for different purposes, depending on what you would like to achieve with your forest. It could both be finding areas for structures that we know is of great value for biodiversity, but of course also find individual trees, both on species and volume and growth. So we use that type of data in many different purposes and different directions. And it's all about being more precise in what you want to do, both on what goals you have for the area, but also for the local conditions. So precision forestry, doing the right thing at the right time, at the right place, you could say.
Yeah, at the granular scale.
Yeah, yeah.
Maria, do you see any unintended consequences, externalities from using digital technology? What are the biggest risks you see as forestry becomes more digital?
Yeah, I like to see potentials, but it's also important to think about risks, obviously. I mean, if we create, as Sverker mentions, this data collection brings us large possibilities to build models and tools and so on to tell us things about the forests. But we also need people in the system that can judge the answers that these models give us, because otherwise we can end up in the wrong corner, so to speak. And also one risk could be if we have these models and we trust them too much, perhaps we decrease variation. I mean, one way of being more resilient is to have biodiversity or large diversity in whatever decisions you take. So that could also be a risk if we kind of streamline things too much. So I just think that we need to be aware of that. And then also for the companies, the risk is that it's not for free. So if that could be accessible to all types of actors. We have very small companies and very large companies, and they have quite different possibilities to make use of this type of technology.
Thank you. Beatrice, you lead an environmental association, so of course you don't do R&D on digital technology yourself, but you very much hope to become a user. What is your biggest hope and biggest fear when it comes to digital technology for nature?
Well, the hope is that it can really help us to see and know more about also the biodiversity and the species that we have in the system, and how climate change will affect our areas that we have in Sweden. That's the hope, and that can help us make greater analyses to really be able to handle this and prepare for it, to make the forestry more resilient to climate change, and the forests, of course. And the risks are maybe that it could be seen as a silver bullet. Maria is we have the same opinion here, that we also need people on the ground. We also need the cultural knowledge and the knowledge from actual humans to contribute to this. And we cannot rely too much on the data. We must really be a bit careful with what we see as well, and see the risks that we can take with it. So that's one very important aspect, we think.
You've been emphasizing the role of people on the ground as complementary to technology. I want to ask Adam about another important complement, which is the business model. I mean, for the success of a technology, you need a coherent and actually appropriate business model in order to make the best use of it. How does Tribula work with the integration between new technologies and business model innovation?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So basically, when we started the company, in the beginning, nobody wanted to have anything to do with us because, we are bringing transparency. The timber prices will increase. What are you doing? This is wrong. I heard Stefan Kruk was meeting the CEO of PostNord. I was like, what? How can you sit together? Because nobody wanted to sit with us. So basically, what we noticed was that, okay, we have investors, we live on risk capital, so let's make it free in the beginning. And, as an engineer, I thought, like, if you just go and show them how much you're going to save by using a digital platform, everyone's going to use it, But it was so much principle. It was so much, honor in, like, no, we don't use a digital technology. What are you talking about? So basically for us, it was like, let's do a strategy where we get the supply on the platform. If we get the supply, then the demand will come. And we just worked on supply, and now we have over like 65,000 forest owners on the platform. And when we had the supply, the demand started coming. The forest companies started buying timber on our platforms, and so on. And we went from having 1.5% in commission from the forest company, like a maximum of 7,500 crowns, to increasing it to 3% without any cap. So we went from like an average revenue per deal from like 5,000 to like 28,000 or something, and we're not losing any forest companies because the market started to establish, the market started to realize how crowded it is, and the timber market is just harder and harder to really get the market, to get the timber. So basically what we realized was that you can build a business model when you really when your users really need your technology. So basically, if your users need the technology, you can really get paid for it. And now we're adding, biodiversity credits, carbon credits, and so on. And what we're seeing is that, now the forest companies are competing with, the Spotifys and the Microsofts and the Apple and so on that is going to compete about the forest in Sweden. And for them, 3% is nothing. For a forest company, we take a commission of 3%. It's much on a timber deal. But looking at like Microsoft, if I go there and like say, hey, I'm going to take 10% commission on a biodiversity deal, they don't even like sneeze. So basically, what we are seeing is that. Dependent on what type of users and how much value you are giving with your digital solution, then the business model will come.
Thank you. Maria, how does digital technology help small private non-industrial forest owners navigate the tensions between economic goals, environmental values, and social values of the forest?
Yeah, I mean, the increasing amount of data and information about the forests, that could be of big benefit, of course, to the forest owners. But when I think about that as well, it's, I mean, as you described, Abben, there are quite different, there are private people that kind of own a small forest, and they're not trained in forestry, they're perhaps not very digital either. So just because there is information, it doesn't mean that you as a private forest owner can interpret the information and learn about it. So I think in a way it's a good thing that there's a lot of information, but on the other hand, you may need some help to interpret it. But then when there are such platforms and tools and so that you can play around with your property, for example. What we realize in research projects when we kind of elaborate on that, it's that people are very eager to learn and curious. They want to know, okay, if I do this, what type of effect does that create? Oh, and if I do that, oh, something else. So I think it's a very good way of kind of opening up to different solutions or different alternatives. And with your property, perhaps in one part of it, you want to do forestry in one way, and then in another way, in another part of it, you would like to do it in another way. But then, of course, it's important that the models behind those tools, that they are valid, so that they don't kind of point in the wrong direction.
Sverker, in our courses on strategy and innovation, we always talk about technology as a weapon to gain competitive advantage. But your program is very much built on the notion of collaboration between industry actors, the largest companies. Could you a little bit explain the logic?
Sure. I often get this question, how can competing companies sit around the table and discussing common research questions? We have, I would say in the Swedish forest sector, we have a great tradition in that sense. I think Skogforsk has also experienced many collaboration projects between the different stakeholders. But we build the program and we choose the right research questions, so it's not so much commercial, not so close to the products. More general, and also the research questions are usually much larger than one company can deal with themselves. The program I'm running with is more for the whole for the whole industry, maybe competing to other industry, maybe fossil-based industries or so,
Yes.
developing the whole industry in different sense. And they have the different companies that are our partners. They have a little bit different strategies on what is important towards. And once a technique is ready for implementation, it's usually one of them that choose to implement it in their system. Not so often more than that. It depends on the timing and the people and the strategy for so it's a way of working that we have get used to.
The focus is very much on the infrastructure that is common across.
Yeah, you could say, increased knowledge on the state of the forest, how is it developing, and then more specific tools can be connected to that within the each company, but keep it on a more general level than being company specific.
Yes. Beatrice, we know there is a vibrant debate about forests in Sweden, around the world. Do you see digital technology as another point of contention, or could it be a bridge between different positions?
I would hope there would be a bridge because facts can also be uniting. We can have a better debate about the conflict of interest. And the problem is maybe about the polarized debate that some people don't really want facts on the table, and that we see as a huge problem because we shouldn't be scared of facts, and if we're trying to hide them, then why? Because we really need facts, because forests are truly connected to climate change in many ways, and are also solutions to climate change. And this affects every person in this room, and every person in this country, every person in this world, and also the animals that we need and live by. So we need those facts on the table. We need to be able to analyze them, and we need to have a discussion about our different interests and how we can manage them in a societal and sustainable way.
Adam, I want to ask you the same question. Are you aligned with it?
I really like this answer. The thing is, like, we are in Handelshögskolan, the business and economy center of Sweden. So basically, I think it's super simple. The things that is gonna give us the most value is gonna cost the most. That's super simple. So basically, looking at the forest owner today, they earn approximately, I think, 1,500 crowns to 2,000 crowns per hectare per year in overall, if you do like your traditional forestry. The first biodiversity credit ever sold in Sweden's history that we did together with Karlbo and Orsa Besparingsskogar and so on, the forest owner got 6,000 crowns per hectare per year, which means it's almost like 5x or 3x or 4x what they earn with a traditional forestry. And that's what I see. When we put a business model on nature, when we put a business model that the forest owner can actually earn 3x more than just harvesting or just selling timber or whatever, then we're starting to have like a really nice conversation, because the forest owner really wants to earn money from their forest, either by selling timber or selling biocredits or carbon credits and so on. So basically, we see that it will change. I think it will change, because the selling carbon credits right now, we have a partnership with a Verra certified company that's gonna start making carbon credits from Swedish forestry. They will earn 3,500 kronor per hectare. So that's also higher than traditional forestry. So basically, I think when we stop putting business models on all these different opportunities that the forest owner have, I think we will see magic.
But tell me a bit more about the demand for these credits. Are we talking about compliance markets, regulated, or voluntary markets? And is it individuals? Is it companies? Is it government?
Like when it comes to the biodiversity, for now it's just like clear sponsoring. So basically, it's like sponsoring the local football team for a big company, and it's it's a small cost. When it comes to carbon credits, yeah, it's the voluntary market, but it's Verra certified carbon credits that's gonna be generated, and it's methods that is okayed by Verra. So But I think we will see, you know, if you look at JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or whatever, like I think JP Morgan bought like 200,000 hectares and just left it as a carbon offset. So basically when we see these type of, you know, muscles and so on come in and start looking at the Swedish forestry or the Scandinavian forestry in another way and putting business models on it, I think it will be really interesting.
Thank you. I have a final question and then we open up the floor. It's the same for all of you. Imagine you have received funding for 1 billion Swedish crowns. What dream technology would you develop with that money or dream of acquiring?
Shall I start? First of all, the problem with that we have today is the fossil emissions. So we really need a research program with that type of budget to focus on that. What type of carbon supply should our society be built on? If we don't have the fossil, it's the bio-based and it's the recycled. That's the only thing we will have. And I think it's important to have more detailed tools on the forest sector. I think it's wise to put that kind of research budget in the forest sector, surprisingly, but to also develop tools towards knowing more about biodiversity, recreational values, etc. And doing that in the forest that is being actively, where active forestry is being taking place. Because we can't choose one of them. We need to do everything in the same time. Sorry for a long time.
Yeah, I'm a bit like taken aback by the question because we don't usually we aren't able to think about that kind of money in my sector. So maybe you could get a better answer in a couple of hours when I had some beers. But I would really say that we really want that data. We have a lot of gaps in data right now regarding biodiversity, not least. So we would really like to see transparent, open access data that can help us to handle climate change and help us to know where to preserve species, where we need to restore nature. So I think that would be the dream project.
Yeah, 1 billion, it would be fantastic. You know, we're raising a round now. It's not going to be 1 billion, but if I had 1 billion, you know, satellites, we're doing some, not me, the smart people at our company is doing some really, really good things with satellites. You know, we're using Copernicus data, which is free, and we can do a lot of analysis on the images and so on. But like, if we could get, you know, better images, you know, if we could get like really expensive data, I would say, with that 1 billion. I would say satellite data, it's the new thing.
I can see your daydream.
Yeah.
Maria.
We've been working a bit with satellite data. There's a lot of issues connected to that as well. But, well, I would agree with what Beatrice said, that we need long-term research areas where we can follow the processes over time, because perhaps we don't really benefit from 1 billion at one point in time. It's more that we have long-term financing so that we can follow the processes, because forestry is a long-term process, and it's quite a challenging task to get that data, not the least talking about biodiversity. Yeah. But also, I think that it's not, in research, it's not all about the money. It's also about which competences and people that you bring together to the same table. And I think that is also very important, that we kind of have these types of projects where we bring different people and interests and stakeholders together to look at this complex problem.
And they feel engaged and motivated to do that kind of research because they believe it's leading us to something worthy.
Yeah.
Surprise. So we have quite a lot of questions from the audience, so I will move, and ask a few. So you've discussed about different targets for the forest and different uses of the forest, wood production, recreation, biodiversity, deer herding, etc. How can digitalization help in sort of managing the multiple uses and goals for the forest?
If I start, first of all, we can develop tools to learn more about where to find areas with great biodiversity, for example, to be more detailed in our description of the conditions of the state of the forest today. And then also learn to follow up how to develop those in different amount of time, in 10, 50, 100 years. So have that type of tools. And that can be done in both production and also the structure in biodiversity. But that also, biodiversity is, I agree very much, we need a lot more knowledge on that. But we can start by having indicators and finding them. And then we also need other ways to develop more knowledge on that.
Yes, so more questions. You've discussed about the people on the ground and the importance of the people on the ground. So now that we are incorporating these new digital technologies, how actually can we prepare, or how these technologies, the capabilities that are needed to use these technologies, can be successfully integrated in the workforce for the forest?
Yeah. Should I start? Well, it's a change. It's a process of change, right? So you need to involve people at an early stage. I think that is very important to really understand. I mean, if you go to the operators in the forest machines, for example, we heard Lotta said that they have a very complex environment and they take a lot of decisions every minute and second. So if we can involve them at an early stage, really try to understand their situation and their day-to-day work, and then we have a lot of tools that we can give them to make their everyday work easier and perhaps more fun, not the least relaxing. So I think we have a lot of potential there, but we need to involve the people at an early stage.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Of course.
What about education, academic education in forestry? Do you think now that we are entering the digital age, also when it comes to forestry, will there be major changes in how forestry and related subjects are taught at SLU, Umeå University?
Yeah, I know that. Well, what really happens is that you say that we need to know these things as well. So you try to push everything into the same education, which I think is quite hard. I think we need to learn to. You need some basic knowledge so that you can be a good. So you know who to ask, basically. But we need to bring different competences together, because I don't think that there's a one-stop shop for the optimal person to work in forestry. We need engineers, we need forest people, and we need biologists and everything of that. Just put them together. Yeah.
Okay. Another question that we have is, what role can digital technology play in balancing the at times opposing objective relating to promoting carbon sequestration versus respecting biodiversity? And what opportunities do you see for the future? So digital technologies and the balance between, for example, carbon sequestration and respecting biodiversity.
What I see when I look at our users, when we ask our users what they want and what we should develop and so on, what we see is that they want to see the potential. There's no other place today where they can go as a forest owner and just say, this is my forest, what type of different opportunities do I have in my forest? What they have now is a forest management plan that say you can harvest here, you can do thinnings here, and you have pine beetle here and so on. And that's really, really good. That's fine. But there's no other place to see what the different other opportunities are. Can I really sell carbon credits? What is it? When we launched, we had I think 2,000 interest users said hey, we want to know more. So I think we need to be able to give them the information and the data in a super simple way based on their forest.
Okay. let me. So one question that we have, is very long, so I will try to summarize it as we go, regards the fact that digital transformation increases energy demands. And you also need, new technologies, new infrastructure. So how can you actually balance this sort of increase for the need of energy with the fact that, we want to pursue sustainability goals, right? I think that's the golden question in all sustainability discussions.
I can just say that we have a huge opportunity to be very much more energy sufficient today in the society. So I think to focus on that will leave a whole lot of space with our renewable energy that we have to focus on this area.
Excellent. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing so much knowledge and also for bringing so much energy on the stage. Thank you, Valentina, for your extra questions. I think it's time to move to the last part of the event. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we had a fantastic afternoon so far. I would say we didn't go light on the program for you today on a Friday afternoon. You're gonna really be deserving your weekend afterwards, but I think it's very exciting. A lot of food for thought. So now I will call the last two guests for today to speak with us. And they have a very, very challenging task in front of them, which is to summarize and make sense of what we have been hearing today. So I would like to welcome to the stage back Professor Frank Geels and also Michael back to the stage with us. Thank you. Yes.
Hi.
So I'm not introducing Frank again, because you have heard the introduction at the beginning, but for Michael, it's the first time on stage, so he will get an introduction.
Not the first time on stage, but here.
No, on today. No, not on stage in general, absolutely. On stage today with us. So Michael is a member of the board at Ericsson, and is also the corporate officer for Ericsson Group, overseeing business priorities and strategies for partnership and customers. Michael joined Ericsson in 1990.
That sounds very, very long time ago.
But I wanted to point the date because he led actually the company's 3G business, and is also an industry expert on the subsequent versions, so 4G and 5G and Internet of Things. So very relevant for our discussion today. He also leads the company's technology work at the World Economic Forum, and is actually not foreign to stages. So thank you very much for being with us today. I would like to remind you that, of course, now we're going to have some conversations, but the QR code is still there. So we still have time to hear from you if you have questions for our guests.
At the table, people actually ask me why I'm here. I'm a bit this is the first time I contribute to diversity, I think, in my professional life, at least. So.
Exactly. So, there's different dimensions of diversity, and here we really wanted to end our event with an academic perspective and an industry perspective as well. And actually, the first thing I would like to really hear from you is your perspective on the day, on the topic, on what we have discussed, and what are some of the key takeaways for you and for our audience from today's discussion.
I think it's been super inspiring. So for me, coming from an industry that was very classical telecoms and so on, and now became this digital platform that everyone is talking about, I think this is really so encouraging. So I'm positive really to see how, if we talk about the forest, for us we talk a lot about transportation, manufacturing, where we see this dramatic change, and without digital, I think it's very difficult to achieve many of these goals. And I think the only perspective that I would add on to this is maybe that we are actually the one with the billions.
Yes.
So we are really making sure that...
Be careful about you.
Yeah, we don't spread them easily.
But what we are doing, and digital is all about scale, so what we are trying to do with our customers and with this 5G system is to make sure that in an enormous scale of billions of devices, we can actually make sure that things are connected in a secure way and so on to basically decrease the cost and access to all these devices in the forest and whatever. So for me, this has been really inspiring to add on my a bit limited perspective.
Thank you. Frank.
Yeah, it's been a very inspiring day. It's very nice to hear the various presentations. I've got three sort of takeaways. So I think the first one is about money, finance. This was emphasized by Linnéa, I think in the first panel. Finance is a big challenge. And I think in Europe, and I don't know about Sweden, we are relying too much on bank lending, and not enough on venture capital, which is more agile. And I think this was one of my takeaways this morning, that the entrepreneurs, which were on the panel in the first, struggle to get money to scale up, to go further. And I think banks, they're not the most sort of appropriate kind of, they're usually a bit conservative. They don't have the right skills to assess sort of the business proposals. So I think if we want to upscale and diffuse this more rapidly for the whole digital transition, we probably need also a change in the finance system. So that for me was one big takeaway. A question that was asked on Stefan was about trust. So I think also the creation of trust in digital. And I think it was also mentioned by Adam when he said, well, when I first came up with my proposal, people didn't even want to be in the same room with me. Because it was, that's one. But also I think the risk of exclusion. So there is a real risk that digital goes too quick and that we are excluding large parts of the population which don't have the right skills to do it. My wife's mother, who's 70, likes to go to the swimming pool, but after COVID, you now have to book this all in advance, on your phone, and it's too complicated for you. In the past, you would just go to the swimming pool, buy a ticket, go swimming. And there's a risk that you exclude the whole, and this is not just swimming pools, it's the health service, it's schools, all these things are now digital, and there's a risk that we're excluding a large part of the population who doesn't have that skill. And this sort of backlash is now happening in the low carbon space. I didn't dwell on it, but there's all kind of pushback in Germany against heat pumps or electric vehicles. And we need to, I think the digital should learn a lesson from that. Try to prevent this societal backlash by anticipating this potential risk that you are excluding people, security risk as well, privacy concerns. So I'd say take that social dimension serious as well. And my third takeaway, which is the biggest, is not so much about the technology anymore. The technology developers are really important. They've done a great job. But to get things to diffuse and accelerate, it's now all about adoption. So that's why I really liked the previous session on forestry. But it's about forestry, it's about agriculture, energy, industry, the automotive, supermarkets. It's more how do we get digital into those sectors who are completely, they've been around often for decades, have got their own business models, their own cultures, their own skill sets. Lotta mentioned it, and also just it's about technology, people, and culture. So, and also in the previous one on the integration in the workforce, which I think you asked, really important. So it's all about absorptive capacity, I think now. It's partly about investment and money. How do organizations, supermarkets or forestry or agriculture, where do they find the money to invest? It's also about creating new project teams. Within your organization, you need to create new project teams to actually implement and start learning. The other thing is learning. You need to allow more learning within your organization. Maybe not everyone, but start small. Capabilities. Either you need to hire new people. I think this was also mentioned in the forestry sector, that know about data science. Or you need to train your existing staff. You may also have the business model innovation was emphasized. I know a case of supermarkets in the UK where they try to, online shopping has been a big thing, of course, in the past 10 years, massively accelerated by the COVID crisis. And it was very difficult for supermarkets to actually learn those skills. And they ended up splitting organizations, like with a big one, Waitrose, which tried to do it themselves, but ended up splitting off Ocado, which is now doing the online delivery, because it's a different skill set. You need to have the vans, you need to have the tools, you need to have warehouses. So online shopping sounds easy, but it actually ended up with a massive organizational change. So for me, the absorptive capacity and how to manage this, And this is about collaborations, which has also been emphasized several times. Collaborations between the digital guys and the people that need to use it, which means they need bilateral, because this was emphasized. We need to understand those forestry people. What actually problems do they face when they're doing things, and how then can you develop tools that help those forestry people? So I think those are some of the dimensions, and there's a whole literature, of course, on all these dimensions. But for me, it's all about the absorptive capacity now. How do we get users to actually do this? And this is a massive transformation. This was emphasized, I think, also. It's, as you said, a change process which is going to take 10, 20, 30 years. We're still in early phases. We're going to have very strange things that we have not anticipated, but we're at the start of this, and we need to see this as a big transformation and learning process across all these sectors.
So maybe let's actually turn the question to Michael. So if, as a technology provider, how does your organization also think about like these new users, or maybe these emerging uses of the technology, and how can you also be proactive in understanding where the adoption may be in the future, and facilitate absorption from maybe sectors that are not the usual suspects, like not maybe your usual customers?
And I think we have been, at least to some extent, successful by, so when we introduced the technology we use today, that is 5G, the 5th generation, we defined it in standards and so on to be a system that for the first time was intended to be used by industries and others, while the earlier generations was more for phones and so on. And what we clearly saw then was that for us to understand what would be needed by a Volvo or an AstraZeneca or an SKF, we need to talk to them early. So even before the system was launched, we actually started programs to work and collect requirements from these industries, which was a good step for us to learn. But then we also understand quickly that without them learning about us, this is anyway going to be meaningless. So we also saw that we started to work together with them in projects in order to also educate them that had either been not connected before or connected through legacy specialized systems without scale and so on. So we spend a lot of effort on that. And I think that's been paying out, even if it takes, I think I've been feeling very much that this takes too long time. But I think it's a big society. It's Sweden has a big industry. It will take time. But I think we have a good way. I think there is a good history in working with these industries in collaboration in Sweden. I think also with people, normal people on anywhere in society. We just had a discussion yesterday with our former boss, Karl-Henrik, who is chairing the AI Commission, about how to get general population more knowledgeable. And we came back to this older examples of this Hempese program that you remember if you're as old as me. Sweden is a society where people like to get together in groups and learn and do things. So I think Sweden is a good place, actually, where there is some tradition of learning also in society at large. So we were fairly positive to this, even if it takes longer than we would have hoped.
So this actually goes back to one of the questions actually we had received before. So I've tried to read a bit and summarize some of the, I would say, feelings of the audience. And maybe now also for Frank mentioned, so maybe Frank, you want to say something more. We have discussed about sustainability in a very environmental aspect. But what about social sustainability? And of course, you touch upon that maybe as we increase the use of these digital technologies, we're forgetting parts of the businesses, of part of the population behind. Maybe some societies are better in sort of creating an environment. So how can we deal with that? What are the challenges, but also maybe the opportunities when we think about social sustainability?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I don't have the ultimate answer to this. I did mention the exclusion, the social acceptance. I think what you just said, I thought was quite interesting, that you feel it's going too slow. And this is sort of typical different kind of organizational cultures. I think the digital space is the idea sort of move fast and break things. It's not Microsoft, who is it? And Facebook, is it? And of course, but most of the other organizations, forestry, health service, they've got a completely different culture. They are not, and sometimes, you know, I mentioned this in the break as well.
That is slow.
Mining.
That is
And sometimes there is, what I sometimes call the mini-me problem. You know, which from the movie Dr. Strangelove, that the digital people assume that everyone else is like them, very interested and fascinated in all the gadgets, you know, and measuring things quick. But of course, most people are just struggling to survive, at least in the UK.
This is great.
Busy lives, you know, so we think fantastic gadgets, and why don't we use them more? And when we did smart meters in the UK, the promise was that once we give people information through smart meters and they know then they will automatically, through information feedback, reduce their demand by 5 to 15% was the promise, and that led to a very strict policy to roll it out by 2020. But of course, this was again based on the assumption that everyone is like me and likes to sort of measure and things. But ended up not working like that at all. You know, most people would be intrigued in the first couple of weeks. And then if I put a teacup on or boil the water, how much energy is going down. But after a few weeks, it would just disappear in the cupboard and they wouldn't look at it at all. So all the benefits were more on the producer side because they got precise measurements, don't have to do meter readings anymore. But the consumer benefits were absolutely marginal. I do know it even led to tensions in the household because often it was the men going around measuring all kind of things, you know. Why are my children doing all this on the phone? and it led to tensions in the household, which is sort of ethnographic evidence of this. So those kind of social tensions do happen, and I think these are kind of interesting organizational cultures, and we should not assume that everyone. That's my point on social acceptance. Not everyone is so keen with all these gadgets. Even though they hold a lot of potential, I think that we need to convince people. And I think show what it does. Don't assume it. I think Adam, again, made that point. You need to show the potential. Because often in the beginning, this is also in firms, it costs much and you don't see short-term benefits. So this is called the J curve. When you start doing, initially your productivity goes down. You need to invest, you don't see the short-term benefits, but then the J curve, over time, it goes up. So you need to get through you need to convince people to overcome that hesitation by showing the benefits. And that's the importance of learning and
I think maybe one piece on that, I think we have seen when we try to educate politicians or whatever, it's so much more powerful that someone from the mining industry or Martin Lundstad from Volvo or someone is telling politicians that this is helping them to reduce 40% or whatever than me. That I know nothing about their business telling them. So I think examples are really key in a world where we have a lot of people that will not have all this competence.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think I have time for one last question, because I think that it was not on purpose, but figuratively, there's an empty chair there. And in my mind, there's a third sector missing on this stage, which is the public sector. So they're not here to answer on the stage. But I would like to ask you, what's the role of the public sector? What's the role of government, of regulation, both in a sense to facilitate this transition, but also as we have a lot of concerns about Europe competitiveness. I think the Draghi report now is the most discussed thing at dinner tables at the moment. So what are the challenges, of course, that we have at the European, but also at the Swedish level, and what you wish to see from the public side, the government and policymaker at different levels to actually drive this transition successfully?
Maybe if I start, we have spent a lot of effort on this, not the least with this AI commission that I talked about, that clearly got the mandate, which we understand after a while, to really address public sector, because their starting point, right or wrong, was that big companies will be able to manage by their own. We have an R&D budget of $5 billion or whatever, that will be enough to understand AI. While most people in Skattemyndigheten, in the public authorities and so on, will not come from that background. So they focused very much on making sure that we get these people with us. I think that's a huge task because you have a variety of competences and background. One good thing that we found in Sweden, that is that if you take digitalization of society and these bank IDs and so on, Sweden is one of the best places in the world because we like people to know about us. We like the tax authorities to know everything about us. In most other countries, that is the biggest hinder. Whatever tools you have, if people distrust the tax and the base authorities, it doesn't help. So there are a couple of, even if it's boring, things that actually led them to start to work with Försäkringskassan, Skattemyndigheten, because they have a lot of data. And you can do a lot with that data. So I think there are areas that will move slower and move quicker, but I think it's half of basically Sweden's economy is around these areas. We have to get it to work, but we also have to assume that they will start from a fairly low base and need a lot of education.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I just want to paraphrase Stefan, who made a very good point on this question. He said we need to change the game to move faster, because he said the economic system is not in the right place, but also the policies are not in the right place. And he said capital will flow faster if the companies are confident about the direction. And I agree with that. So now there will be money available, but that will only be there when companies have a greater sense of clarity about where to go. So I think policymakers need to help change the financial system, but also create the niches where you can experiment and learn, and help articulate visions about where to go, to set the direction, and then help standardize things that work and set out the policies to help nurture the learning. So yeah, I thought that was very. I've got lots of lessons, lots of good points, but this was one point that I thought was really good.
And that is more important in many areas than hoping that public funding will solve the problem. That is my view.
Excellent. So thank you very much to our guests.
Thank you.
This leads us to the conclusion of today's event. Thank you so much, all of the audience, for being with us for the whole afternoon. Thank you to our collaborators and sponsors to actually make this day possible. Please do not run away. We have a mingle with drinks and snacks in the atrium, so join us. There's more time to talk, more questions to be asked, more conversations, and we hope to see you next year for our dialogue on digital again. Thank you.